As we go throughout the day, I want to take the opportunity for you to get to know and for us to get to know some of our newly elected representatives. We're going to try to do a lot of that at lunch, but Andy Murr from Junction is not going to be able to be with us much longer, so I'm going to have Andy come up as I introduce the next panel. Andy, why don't you come on up and do 3 minutes trying. Won't the next panel come up for, let's see, Steve Hagel, Luke Legay, Mike Massey, and Commissioner David Porter. Come on up. Well,
While they're getting seated, I'll introduce myself. My name is Andy Murr, or Andrew Murr, and I am the Republican Party candidate in House District 53. As you may be aware, Representative Hildebrand did not run for his seat again. He ran for a statewide office, and as a result, it was an open seat. There is no Democrat on the ballot in November. A little perspective, House District 53 has 12 counties in it, and it goes from Ozona to Kerrville, south to Hondo and Castroville, north to Llano and Highland Lakes. And we knocked thousands of doors in that process, and the one common denominator that was an issue to many, many people is water. They all know water is important to them personally, to their businesses, and to the success of their communities. And Mr. Williams spoke about that a little earlier. I think you'll probably hear more talk about that today. That is the #1 issue I think that faces a lot of folks now and in the distant future. I spent 5 years as a county judge before running for this office, and I'll end with this perspective, is that a lot of folks look to your leaders to have both knowledge and wisdom. And I read a little prophecy in Reader's Digest the other day, and it said the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is understanding not to put it in your fruit salad. And so with that, you're going to leave today with a lot of knowledge, and let's also hope that it is put to good use. Thank you for your time.
Drew, are you ready for us? Is this live? Is this on?
Yes, it is.
Everybody here? Okay, good. My name is Tryon Lewis. I have the honor of being the moderator of a panel that we'll have now on the overview on dealing with energy issues. On behalf of our panel, I first want to start off by thanking very much the city of San Angelo, Tom Green County, and this area for being such a nice host for all of us. To thank you for sending us Drew Darby. I always think this area, I don't know if this area is just lucky or just really good, but the most respected member in the House is probably Drew, and then Bob Duncan has always been the Senate. And the common denominator for them is they represent Tom Green County and the surrounding counties. So either you're very lucky or you're very good, but whichever way it is, thank you very much for sending them to do duties in the House. This panel to deal with energy issues, I thought what we would do is, first of all, start off by each of us just introducing ourselves briefly to you and giving a short statement with regard to our views, our energy issues in general, dealing with the state. Then specifically, I thought we would go over the growth, where we anticipate growth to be. I'll call some of the members. Where we anticipate growth to be, what we expect the prospects for energy industry in Texas to be in the near and long run future. So where are we going to go? What are some of the challenges of that? Specifically, there's been lots of publicity about environmental challenges. So what are some of these environmental challenges? What are the nature of them and how we deal with them? And then I'll even go on to some of the other issues involving other than oil and gas industry. And then with time available, open up for questions. To begin with, then I'll just start with me as far as introductions. I'm Tryon Lewis. I'm an attorney in Odessa, Texas, and a member of the House of Representatives. I am on Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence Committee and Environmental Regulations Committee. So it's always wonderful, of course, for somebody from Odessa to come down and here to see lakes and rivers and that sort of thing, and such wonderful people. I am not running for re-election. I've decided not to run. I should mention also, before I did that, I held office as a state district judge for 21 years, and then went to the House of Representatives, where it's an absolute honor to deal with the hardest working people I've ever been around and the most patriotic people I've ever been around, the members of the House of Representatives. And even sometimes we say good things about the Senate, not often, but they even work hard sometimes. So my successor in office, Brooks Landgraf, is here. Was introduced, I think, earlier, but Brooks Landgraf over here, also an attorney in Odessa, Texas. So that's me as an oil patch kid, always a great interest in the oil and gas business, and just absolutely delighted to see how much smart, hardworking people can do in an industry like that. So that's me. Let's just go down the road, and if everyone introduce yourself and make a short statement about where we are.
I will. Good morning, Luke Legate. I see a lot of familiar faces out there, and I know a lot of you have heard me speak and talk over the years, and my friends Kathy over there, I'll try to not tell any bad jokes. It's a running joke that I have nothing but bad jokes to tell at a lot of these speeches, but thank you. It is an honor to be here. Just a comment about Judge Lewis here. We're really going to miss him in Austin, but we're very excited to have Brooks coming in. I asked him, I said, please don't retire, and he didn't heed my pleas, but his service has been impeccable, and we're going to really miss him. But we're excited to have Brooks coming on. My name is, again, Luke Legate. I represent a group we call the Joint Association, Oil and Gas Education. We travel statewide talking about oil and gas business. We talk about the industry, and we make ourselves available to educate folks. You know, a lot of people in this room understand the industry, but there's a lot of people in Texas that don't. So I travel the state almost weekly, delivering speeches to Rotary clubs, civic clubs, chambers of commerce, you name it, anybody that will let me talk and talk about the industry and answer questions, because a lot of people have questions. They don't understand the industry. Maybe they just, you know, sometimes we don't get to hear all the facts in our soundbite world, and so we make a conscious effort to get out and educate folks and make ourselves available to local elected officials, workforce groups, you name it. So we're honored to be here, and thank you again, Chairman Darby, for putting all this together, and your staff as well. It's been impeccable. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm David Porter, Texas Railroad Commissioner. I want to thank Chairman Darby for having me here on the panel today. Try to keep it real brief so we can open up the panel for questions. As most of you know, the Railroad Commission is the state's chief energy regulator. We have primary regulatory jurisdiction over the oil and natural gas industries, as well as pipelines, natural gas utilities, the propane industry, and coal and uranium surface mining operations. Makes the Commission a very relevant and a very busy state agency. As Commissioner, it's our job to ensure fair and consistent energy regulations in Texas, so businesses can safely, efficiently, and economically produce the energy that is needed to power Texans and the Texas economy. Currently, right now, there are about 1,500 rigs drilling nationwide for oil. A little over 800 of those are in Texas. What makes that figure really impressive is that roughly half the drilling rigs in the world are drilling in the United States. So doing the math, that means a quarter of the drilling rigs in the world are drilling in Texas right now. Our geology and reserves are partly responsible for this activity, but what really matters is the regulatory environment. Just a brief example, in the Northwest, we can look at the Utica and the Marcellus shales in Ohio and Pennsylvania. Those formations don't stop at the state line, but at the New York state line, but the production does. With continued responsible and even-handed regulation, Texas will continue to lead the U.S. in energy production and towards energy independence. Among the issues that this extreme amount of activity is brought on is as everyone here knows, there's a lot of question about the transportation system, the roads, a lot of questions about pipelines. Trucks are going to continue to be responsible until we get a pipeline system in place. I think it's imperative that we get these pipes in the ground and that local communities are protected in the process. Flaring, of course, is an issue. There's not one simple solution to reducing flaring. Industry needs to look at the technology available and how it can be used. And together we need to examine alternative domestic markets for natural gas like CNG and LNG for transportation and exploration. We also need to encourage exporting that resource. Last year, I launched a statewide plan that aims to increase the use of natural gas as a transportation fuel and as a result increase the market for natural gas in Texas. We're going to have a big event this fall in Austin called the Texas Natural Gas Summit, and I want to encourage everybody to put October 23rd at the Palmer Event Center on their calendar. I hope to see you there. Finally, like everyone in this room, I'm concerned about water quality and quantity issues. But the point I really want to emphasize on that, if we didn't use another drop of water from this day forward for oil and gas activity, the state's still going to have a water problem because of the tremendous population growth that we've had in Texas for the last few years. And yes, in the oil and gas business, we need to conserve water. At the commission, we've been active. We redid our recycling rules last year to encourage recycling. We're going to continue to do that, but I just want to put that in perspective as we talk about water usage.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Mike, you're next down there.
Great. Hi, my name's Mike Massey. I'm a partner at Jackson Walker, proud to call Sam Allen here in San Angelo a partner. I can tell you that the folks that worked for me when I moved a group of folks over to Jackson Walker a few years ago were very afraid of going to a big law firm. And one of the most peace-giving piece of information I was able to give to my folks is that we have a San Angelo office. And any firm's got to have a San Angelo office. It's got to be a little bit more down to earth than any other. So we do a whole lot of oil and gas and energy work. My personal practice is primarily in electric generation. I have a sad day job of being an air quality lawyer. So I read thousands of pages of Federal Register for a living. I still can see, kind of. I will not bore you with a bunch of facts and figures. I do have some packets. If anybody's very interested in what EPA is doing about greenhouse gases, I'm here for you. I'll be here through the break. I'm going to have to get back to Austin, but I've got a deep dive on that issue. I'm not going to show this slide deck because I don't think we have time. It's all right, but you know, don't need to rush. I'll show one slide just as I'll put it up there so people can stare at me while I'm talking. You know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. The thing I'm going to tell you about, this packet I have, by the way, does talk about a lot of new Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, initiatives on greenhouse gas that extend primarily on electric generation currently, but are targeted, and EPA has legally committed itself to actually apply that to refineries, and they are ongoing in an initiative to pursue methane emissions at oil and gas E&P sites. And I will tell you, we are all in this together. I do a lot of work for rural electric power, and electric power generation all together. I'm a counsel in the D.C. Circuit in the United States Supreme Court on many of these issues, and EPA has settled friendly lawsuits with environmental groups to pursue greenhouse gas regulation, first at electric power, then at refineries, and they've launched a GHG initiative for methane emissions at oil and gas sites. The environmental groups, and I'll be so bold as to suggest the White House, have a strategy. It is a divide and conquer strategy. They're trying to get states to fight against each other, and they're trying to get industries to fight against each other. And the way they've developed their first phase of this rule is to try to go after states like Texas. This chart behind me, hard to read for you, but a pie graph is pretty easy to read just in terms of proportion. Everybody who lives in Texas is proud to know that it's a big state. That also means that we generate a lot of electricity. The reason we do is because we produce a majority of the nation's fuels, chemicals, and manufactured goods. It takes a lot of electricity to do that. We are a big state in terms of people, and our climate requires a lot of air conditioning. We use roughly more electricity than the next two states combined. That's not necessarily a bad thing, and I'll show you why in a second. So, one argument the environmentalists try to make is, well, we're a big polluter. But they always talk in terms of aggregate emissions. And they talk about, oh, look at all these oil and gas emissions. They put everything within the state lines together. They don't look at individual sites and see how operators are doing. How clean is that power plant? How clean is that oil and gas site? They put us all together, they add it up, and they say we're a big deal. Well, that's not the way it should work. This slide here shows you that, well, let me start here. This slide shows you what the share of Texas is in terms of electric generation in the country. We produce about 11% of the nation's electricity. In its proposed greenhouse gas rule for existing power plants, EPA is asking Texas not to carry 11% of the load, but to carry nearly 18% of the load. And I will tell you, Congressman Barton's calculations are that it's actually 25%. So you don't have to be in the weeds on this rulemaking to understand Texas is getting a raw deal. And so what I'll jump to is, I'll debunk a myth for you, okay? Texas is the worst CO2 polluter in the nation. Absolutely not true. Texas has a lower greenhouse gas emission rate in its power fleet than 32 other states. That's the green versus everybody else. This is where Texas is hard to read, okay? What they're doing again is they add us all up. Because we're a big state, we're the biggest polluter. Well, that's not the way it works. When you want to, and just like the former speaker says, if you want to clean something up, you got to go to the site, you got to do technology, you got to reduce emissions at the site. Once those sites on a per energy production basis are this good, it isn't wrong to be taken after Texas, but that's exactly what EPA is doing. This slide here shows you how much of the CO2 reductions, carbon dioxide reductions, Texas is getting stuck with relative to the rest of the country. We have been given a budget of emitting 791 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour in our generation fleet. Now that's just a number. Let me tell you what that number is. That number is half what about 20 other states are getting. It's less than what a brand new, highly efficient, state-of-the-art natural gas combined cycle unit can do. I do a lot of power generation permitting work. I've got many natural gas power clients, and we can't make that rate. Okay? This is a big play for renewables and clean tech companies, and we don't have time to get into it, but I do have a lot of materials if you're interested. What I will say is the San Antonio Express-News just yesterday released an editorial that said this rule is good for Texas. And the argument being promoted by promoting is that somehow this rule is going to so drive up the price of natural gas that that's going to help Texas. Okay? We want a strong natural gas price. I work with Commissioner Porter and a lot of truck stop clients to make sure we're using natural gas in our transportation fleet. I do a lot of natural gas, electric power generation. We're going to build natural gas power fleet. Okay, that's what we're building right now. That's the thing to build. But things like regulations and this kind of short-term argument that environmental groups are saying that gas is going to do better and therefore Texas is going to do better. Very short-sighted. I can tell you the oil companies certainly don't agree with that. The chemical companies that rely upon a stable price of electricity and natural gas don't believe with that. We have a lot of manufacturing jobs. So I have the honor of representing a group called the Partnership for a Better Energy Future in Texas. The partnership is a foundation of associations, the American Farm Bureau, the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, the American Petroleum Institute, American fuel and or chemical manufacturing groups. All of those groups have gotten together really for the first time on an environmental regulation because they see what's going on. And so I'll pass the mic and just tell you that if you hear that EPA's regulation of greenhouse gas is somehow mystically good for the state of Texas, I can assure you it is not, factually, legally, from a business standpoint. And we could talk for an hour about why that is, but I'll be glad to answer any questions once we get to the open session. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mike. And Steve, would you introduce yourself and kind of give us an idea of what you do and your connection with the energy industry?
Sure. My name is Steve Hagel. I'm the Deputy Director for the Office of Air at the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And my office is responsible for air quality permitting and also for air quality planning. So for areas like Houston and Dallas that are outside of or exceeding the national ambient air quality standards, we try to work to get those areas back in. We also work with other areas that are close to try and ensure that they don't exceed those standards. And one of the things I want to tell you about Mike's slides up here,
that the slide where he showed that that Texas, whereas Texas is right now is 1284 pounds per megawatt hour, that number is actually lower than 8 or 9 states' final goal in EPA's rule. So right now we're lower than 8 or 9 states without doing anything. So that just kind of tells you where a little bit about the fairness issue with the rule that Mike was talking about. The other thing I wanted to say about that is that when EPA did a lot of workshops, a lot of things around the country, and tried to get input on developing this proposal, and I think what they heard from most of the states was, well, you guys need to set the goal and then let us figure out how to get there. Well, they didn't do that. They broke it up and set these pieces of goals. They set goals inside the fence, which probably are legal, and then they set 3 different goals outside the fence, which probably aren't legal. And we certainly don't have the authority here at the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to do those things outside the fence of a power plant. So obviously we're probably all going to end up back in court again at some point when the EPA goes ahead with the final rule, but we're also trying to work with the Railroad Commission and the Public Utility Commission and ERCOT and others to develop comments on the rule and hopefully get some of this changed, but we'll see. Oil and gas, this is the one slide that I brought with me. As Commissioner Porter indicated, business is booming. This is Sandra, can you punch the arrow for me in a minute?
Sure. Oh, here.
This is okay, I'm sorry.
It might be here.
This is a 2002 Google Earth nighttime shot of Texas, okay? Remember, this is 2002. This next slide is 2012.
Goodness.
That's that little, especially the Eagleford down there below San Antonio, and then you'll see also out there in the Permian. Whoops, it wouldn't let me go back. There we go. Again, 2002, 2012. So business is booming in the oil and gas industry, and that's good for the state of Texas. So.
Thanks very much, Steve. You know, we've all been through booms and busts. I mean, if you've been around West Texas very long or been around the oil patch very much, we've seen it go both ways. And Luke, would you share with us your thoughts on how do you see how solid the growth is, where the expiration might be, and how we might be doing in the future?
Sure, thank you. You know, that's one of the #1 questions is, you know, how long is all this going to continue to accelerate and boom and last in the future? I can tell you, you know, from what a lot of engineers and a lot of companies and what they're telling, you know, investors in Wall Street, and also just some of their actions that are publicly available, a lot of companies are simply divesting out of other areas and putting their capital into Texas. Several companies are selling off foreign assets. A lot of companies are getting out of areas like Alaska and others to come back into the United States. Well, Alaska's in the United States for the most part. To get back to get well, Texas, we're our own country now, so you know they're applying for citizenship in the nation of Texas. But you're seeing that sort of renaissance of a lot of companies that are putting in literally billions of dollars in capital, and I'm not the smartest business guy in the world because I work in government affairs, but I will say that if you're putting billions of dollars into areas like Cotulla and here in Big Lake and Barnhart and other places for exploration, the future looks very bullish. I will also say that, you know, a lot of folks are looking at the Eagleford, and you got to remember 6 years ago, give or take, the 20 some odd counties, as those slides will show you, were producing about 1,000 barrels of oil a day. Today that's well over 1 million. There is also a formation underneath the Eagleford Shale called the Pearsall Shale. With the advances in technology of directional and horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing techniques that are accelerating every day, those reserves could be tapped. Obviously, in the Permian Basin, that's been around, I call it the old workhorse, that's been delivering for years and years. is seeing resurgence. I remember being with Judge Lewis at Monaghan's 2 or 3 years ago, and he was telling a story about how people would say, oh, well, this area's just going to dry up, and all of a sudden now you see lights and drilling operations that are proliferating all over the Permian Basin and moving this way into the Wolfcamp and Sprayberry and all of those formations. With the new technology, they remain very, very confident in the long-term exploration of this. We still have some of the largest natural gas reserves in the state. The Barnett Shale is still one of the largest gas fields in the world. Obviously, production has slowed down up there due to the price of natural gas going down. But when we're talking about 6 years, 7 years ago, building import facilities for natural gas, and now we're exporting it to the world, the future does look bright. From a geopolitical standpoint, you've got Western Europe and Putin and Asia and all the instability in the Middle East. Now is the time more and more for our country to be exploring and harvesting our natural minerals. So, you know, like any oil people will tell you, you know, thank you, Lord, for this one. I promise not to mess this one up. I'll use a lighter term, but I think this one seems like it's got some staying power, and a lot of the folks I've spoken with and visit with feel very, very positive about the future. You know, it's still a worldwide traded commodity. It drives our economy, drives our nation, and I think Texas is posed to capitalize on it for the next foreseeable future in decades.
Thank you very much, Luke. David, you and I have seen booms, we've seen busts, and booms are more fun. But you're the head of an agency that must have challenges dealing with just the growth, the volume, which your agency must mess with. I mean, we have trouble in Odessa just keeping police officers and deputies from getting hired away in the oil industry. I can't imagine what your challenges are. Would you share with us some of the challenges that your agency, the Railroad Commission, has had, and some of the good things that you've been able to make out of that? David?
As you mentioned, it's certainly keeping staffed up is a huge challenge. When I first came on the agency in January 2011, we had about 650 employees. I'm speaking round figures now, and part of that was due to some attrition. Right now, we're close to 800. I think in the proposed budget that we're going to ask for this year, we're increasing that substantially. I think we're asking for another 180, speaking round figures, people, just to keep up with the tremendous growth and activity that we're having in the state. You know, the public expects us to inspect wells, pipelines. Industry wants and needs permits done on a timely basis, and that's what we've got to endeavor to continue to do, and that's what we're going to come to you folks in the next legislature and ask for.
You know, one thing I think that's been, while you've been there, a breath of fresh air, is that there were always complaints that the computer systems were way out of date, the software packages were way out of date, that the public could access, for instance, New Mexico regulatory information better than Texas, and I think that's being addressed. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
We are working on that. A lot of activities going on. I hope we've introduced our new website. Hopefully a lot of you have used it, and you know, hearing a lot of feedback. Anytime you change something, people don't like change necessarily, but we're working on it. We're in progress. Within the next few months, we will know for sure whether it works, but it looks like the update is working well, and we're continuing ahead with it.
Thank you. Steve, you know, I never thought I'd vote for a greenhouse gas bill because I didn't think it's one of the things that we ought to be regulating, since it's a naturally occurring, it's air, you know. But we did have one. The House passed it. It's Wayne Smith's bill, House Bill 788. And our main concern was, or the the concerns of industry were that because we did not regulate greenhouse gases, that meant that only that is, when I say we, I mean the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ, did not have a regulation of that substance, of those substances, that meant the EPA did it, and that they were very slow. I mean, they weren't processing applications, so instead of building plants in Texas, companies were going across our borders and building elsewhere just because they could actually get their environmental permits. That bill did pass. It was signed into law. The TCEQ is charged with processing those applications. I'm not exactly sure where we are as far as the regulations to do that, because you have to develop regulations and start processing those. Where are we on that, Steve?
Well, we wrote the regulations. We submitted the package to EPA, and we were gearing up, getting ready to take over the greenhouse gas permitting program here in Texas, and then the Supreme Court threw us a little curveball. And so the court still has not issued the mandate on their decision yet, and we're kind of waiting on that to see where we go, but we're trying to figure out whether we can still take part of that rule and do greenhouse gas permitting here in Texas. And then there's the other camp is, well, because of the Supreme Court decision, you don't have to do greenhouse gas permitting at all in Texas until EPA acts and revises their rules. And so we're talking to the Attorney General, we're talking to who is talking to DOJ, and we're talking to the EPA, and we're trying to figure out exactly where we are. So I can't give you a good answer today, Judge Lewis, but we're hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks we'll know for sure how we're going to proceed.
But the rules are written, because that's difficult. You have to come up with rules and that are fair to everybody, and a procedure and all that. But those are written and they are ready with the rest of this guidance. Then.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think as I recall the testimony before the Environmental Regulations Committee on which I serve, it should lower the time that it's required to get a permit for maybe a matter of years, maybe 2 years, down to 4 to 6 months, I would guess, would be an average. Would that be ballpark right?
Well, it's probably a little more than 4 to 6 months, because it's still, assuming it's a PSD permit, which is a federal permit, it does take a little bit longer to do that.
Okay.
But hopefully it will shorten the time frame, and the other thing it will do that will significantly help folks is most of them won't have to deal with things like Endangered Species and Historic Preservation Act and things like that. They won't have to do those reviews anymore. So that will help a lot as well for most folks.
Very good. Mike, let me ask you on greenhouse gas, a lot of expertise in power plants, production of power, and issues that deal with that. You've mentioned in your opening remarks about the difficulties of your clients and members are facing dealing with EPA regulations. Let me ask you about coal plants. I mean, we don't obviously have a lot of that in West Texas, but in East Texas there are a number of coal plants. As far as energy production in that sector, what are the challenges faced from the carbon emissions regulations of the federal government that are being implemented?
Well, thank you, Judge. Yeah, we don't think of Texas as a coal state. I represent folks that generate power, and my joke is that we'll use anything to generate power. It could be kitty litter if it's got a long-term fixed low price to it, because consumers and businesses want cheap electricity. When natural gas is competitive and low and stable, it is a great fuel. It's both clean and affordable, and we're going to use it, and we're going to continue to use an abundance of it. But coal has played an important mix and will continue to in our generation mix because it is a hedge. In every business, you need hedges. You need multiple fuels because commodities go up and down, and consumers don't like their electricity prices fluctuating up and down. And certainly, when you have a chemical industry, I just visited the Baytown refinery, Exxon, and when you have petrochemical industries investing billions of dollars on the concept that we're going to have stable commodity prices. Domestically, for the first time in decades, we're investing and expanding because of this great liquids and natural gas boom that we have. This commodity price risk is big. So what does that mean for coal? Well, coal's about 37 to 40% of our power mix in Texas. A lot of people don't know that. Because we use more electricity than the next 2 states combined, we use more coal than anybody else. EPA isn't just targeting coal, let me be clear. There is a war on coal. Let nobody dissuade you from that fact, but there is a war on fossil fuel. I was talking last night with some folks. EPA has a chart on their website. It's their data. I don't necessarily endorse it, but it says what are the biggest sources of greenhouse gases in the country. Power plants are way up there. Refineries are right behind them. And then there's this bar for oil and gas. And what they're using is CO2 equivalents. And that bar is bigger than anybody else. So that scares me a little bit. The coal-fired component of our fleet is not growing significantly because really the fuel of choice, Judge, today is natural gas. That's what we're building because the price is right and it's a good, clean fuel. But we have, and if you remember anything I say, remember these words, we have no megawatts to spare. My full-time job is making sure that my clients don't get calls because the lights go out. When lights go out, people get upset and businesses leave. Texas, according to the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, needs to build hundreds of new power plants in the next 5 to 10 years just to keep up with our current growth. This rule that I just talked about and the judge referred to, EPA's own assessment says it is going to close 14,000 megawatts of power plants in Texas alone. 12 of those are coal and 2.5, or actually it's 3, and almost 3 1/3, 3,200 megawatts of oil and gas fired units. So we've got a real problem. And you know, you talk about the growth issue. Our growth is a significant win. And I think, I will tell you that what's going on with the White House and EPA, if you look at the disparity between what Texas is having to do and what other states are having to do, we are getting punished for growth. That's not a conspiracy theory, it's factually true. It's not about what our oil and gas operators are doing in the field, it's the fact we're so successful in the aggregate, they're punishing us. In this carbon rule, Judge, you know, we're asked to retire, you know, roughly 60% of our coal fleet by the end of the rule. 60%. West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Missouri, lots of states that use a whole lot of coal, no retirements.
They must be swing states.
So, and Steve made the best point, is that our emission rate as a fleet right now in 2014 is lower than the 2030 goal that those states are getting, significantly lower. So something's wrong, it's not a conspiracy theory. I have some confidence that, like the Supreme Court did with regard to the greenhouse gas rule you asked Steve about, I think we're going to start seeing the courts start pushing back on EPA. But absent congressional action, I don't have a lot of confidence that we're going to be able to stop them. And it is going to be critically important that we do, because Texas's growth is targeted. Other states are getting a pass, and they're using, you know, very successful states and our growth as a way to try to point us out and go after our greenhouse gas emissions. So that's something we're going to have to do. Bye.
Thanks, Mike. You know, another challenge is to do with fracking. The engine for the spectacular growth that there's been in the oil and gas industry is multiple vertical fracks and horizontal drilling, fracking. But I think that the Railroad Commission has been looking, David, has been looking at studying that situation, because there have been some complaints from various places about fracking. There's been some publicity about fracking nationwide. I think that that's one thing that the seismic activity, and either from disposal wells and fracking, is something that y'all been looking at. Is that right? And what's the status of that, David?
A little background on that. Not to mitigate some of the other talk, but I think the biggest concern about seismicity in the state arose around the end of the year with some things that were happening a little bit northwest of Fort Worth, Azle, Reno type area. We're very concerned about it at the commission, hired a seismologist, Dr. Craig Pearson, came on board the 1st of April. He's been really busy examining that. Our staff has been working on it. At this next conference that we're actually having on August 12th, there is going to be a proposal which I think will be passed. We're going to put a rule out for comment. And the 3 things that the rule will be talking about at that point in time is basically requiring applicants for disposal wells to go ahead and check the USGS database to make sure, check on any seismic activity or faults that are recorded in the plume area of their disposal well. We're also going to put into the rules, make it very clear that if scientific data indicates that a disposal well is causing seismic activity, that the commission has the authority to require the operator to take action such as reducing the volume or pressure being injected, or perhaps even totally shutting down that disposal well. And also put in there where we can require more frequent monitoring or reports of their injection activity and volumes. So that will be voted on and put out for comment for anyone that's interested in commenting on that at the next conference.
Okay, thank you, David. Luke, out here growing up in West Texas, fracking has been so common for decades. No one thinks anything of it. But in the rest of the nation, that's not necessarily true, and not necessarily true in the rest of the state. I think that some communities have talked about banning fracking, maybe North Dallas area. Do people understand these issues? I know that you're in the sort of the business, and your desire is to help educate people about oil and gas exploration and production issues. Is it widely understood? Are the issues about fracking widely understood, and are there any misconceptions?
I would say yes, that there is an education gap out there in the greater general public. For the most part, I've been asked questions of, well, you frack a well every single day for 30 years, right? Or you frack a well at 500 feet below the surface, right? There is a lot of misconceptions about it. We actively, in the industry and individual companies and trade associations and others, are literally are fighting and out there doing grassroots one-on-one, trying to educate as many folks as possible about the industry and making ourselves more available to answer questions, going into communities and explaining the processes. I have found that, in my, literally in the last 3 years of traveling almost the entire state, people just want information. In this world, we hear anecdotes, we hear things on the internet, we hear things on the news, and a lot of folks take that as fact. So it is our job and our responsibility, and as people in communities that depend on the oil and gas industry, to educate our neighbors and our friends. The best spokespeople are the people that are just like in campaigns. If you know someone, talk to them about that. Don't, a lot of people just accept things as truth without even looking at them. There's a lot of misconceptions. I get questions like, well, the oil and gas industry isn't regulated at all, is it? There are some questions out there like that. So we have, I think we've done a better job of being out in the communities. We can always do better, but there's a lot of folks that move from out of state that are obviously moving here for the job climate, that may have never experienced any oil and gas production anywhere. And so it's up to us to put out good factual information and address those concerns. One of the things that we always try to concentrate on, obviously in public speaking and things that we do, is making contact with local officials. A number of you are sitting here in this audience where I've come and visited your office and provided education materials in my phone, in my cell phone, in my email. And if there is an issue and someone has a question, call me. Let's talk about it. Let's be more open and honest, and we have to continue to do that every single day. Texas is a big place, but I think the more people that have a stake in this industry, from small business owners to the large companies, all need to be out there talking to their friends and neighbors, saying, this is the thing that's driving our economy right now, that's doing very, very well and providing a lot of jobs and significant number of taxes. You're talking about last year, our industry put $13.6 billion into the rainy day fund, the economic stabilization fund. that is significant money. There's a lot of other states that would love to have that savings account. So again, public perception is there. Sometimes the media doesn't capture the entire story, but there are attempts to sort of demonize the industry, and we have to be vigilant. We have to come back to it.
And how does your group, very briefly, how does your group, the statewide Joint Association Oil and Gas Education Issue, how are you attempting to do that, to get that done, that education done?
Literally, we're out on the road every week, whether it's going into speaking at chambers. I've spoken at every Rotary Club and chicken fried steak dinner, and got the stomach to prove it. Going into communities and talking to the people that are leaders in the community, sort of from top level down. We have education books that we've distributed, over 10,000 of them statewide that explain the industry, explain the process. We have it available online. Several cities and entities linked to that. When people need information about the industry, we provide that willingly. So it's a full-time job, and it's great to go and talk about oil and gas, and we've got a good story to tell, and lives are really being changed by this, with people that now have the opportunity to work and live in their own communities and be a part of this great nation.
Thanks, Luke. Steve, my last question, down to you. In the regulatory environment, the oil and gas exploration and production industry, we often think of the Railroad Commission as the regulatory agency. And just for those people here who might not know, what is the role in exploration sites and in later production sites? What is the role of the TCEQ? What sort of things do you regulate, your commission regulate?
Well, and you have to remember I'm an air guy, so I'm going to
Yes.
talk mainly about air. There are some water pieces of it as well, and I usually get in trouble if I try to talk about those. But from the air side, on the exploration piece of it, we don't deal with that. It's primarily the Railroad Commission. And then once the well is completed and the production takes over, then those facilities do need some sort of authorization from the TCEQ. And we've worked really hard because you see that slide back there, and we report to the Legislative Budget Board a number of performance measures, and one of those is how many authorizations we do a year. And for years, our number was around 5,600 authorizations a year. And in the last 3 years, it's really almost doubled. This year will be over 10,000 authorizations a year. And roughly half of those are coming from the oil and gas industry now. And so we've worked really hard to try and streamline that process, to do electronic permitting. A lot of companies have come in and said, hey, I've got all these wells out there that maybe I bought from somebody and I don't know how they're authorized or if they're authorized, and so I've got 200 or 300 of them. We'll say, okay, well, get them all together and then bring them into us, and we'll do a kind of a batch authorization, and we've done a number of those, and they've been really successful. And so those are the kind of things we're doing. We are, from a enforcement side, there's a couple of folks from the regional office out here in the audience, regional offices out here in the audience. We've looked at, it's mainly a complaint-driven investigation for oil and gas sites, but we've also done some flyovers with an infrared camera and things like that, some people may have heard about. What we do there is once we see something that's kind of questionable on those flyovers, then we'll go out and talk to those companies and say, hey, what's going on? And usually it's some sort of maintenance issue or something, and we work with them to get that fixed, and it goes away, and we don't take any enforcement action against them for that. It's just as long as they're willing to work with us to fix those issues, we typically don't do a lot of enforcement, or certainly not penalties anyway. So, but we do, and the complaints, starting with the Barnett Shale and now moving down into the Eagle Ford Shale, and some in the Permian Basin, but mainly it's the Barnett and the Eagle Ford. The complaints have gone up, mainly because of noise and some other issues. and we don't have any authority over noise.
But now a lot of the drilling's in more heavily populated areas than it used to be, I guess.
Yeah, well,
Some of it.
and that's where it really started in the Barnett, because that area was highly populated and dealt with the oil and gas industry before. We got a lot of complaints in the Barnett Shale from, basically drilling rigs in the backyard, and so we made a lot of efforts there to try and educate the industry, educate the public, and also deal with those complaints, and I think it's served us well in trying to deal with some of these newer areas. Now, the Eagle Ford is obviously a little bit more rural area than the Barnett Shale, and so I think that helps as well. So, plus they're used to the oil and gas industry.
Thanks, Steve. I've left a generous 40 seconds for questions from the group, but do any of you, are there any questions for the panel members? Anybody have any questions? If not, thank you very much for being so kind and attentive. Just a quick point of privilege on behalf of the legislators and our staff. I want to thank the San Angelo Chamber of Commerce and everybody there. This is just a wonderful event, and it's an honor to be asked out here, and it's always a lot of fun for us, and we just hope you keep doing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.